Welcome to today's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, your channel for super easy, no-nonsense advice on how to declutter and organise your home. Please welcome your hosts, professional organisers Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners to episode 20 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm Ingrid. If you have clutter and want to sort it out, this is the show for you. In today's episode, we're talking to Juliet Landau-Pope, owner of JLP Coach, working in London. She's a coach, professional organizer, study skills expert, and she knows everything about procrastination. Juliet is an Oxford graduate, has experience of working in adult education as a university lecturer, researcher, editor, mentor, coach, and consultant. Juliet started her company JLP Coach in 2008 and offers services that include practical decluttering, clutter coaching, and study skills for teenagers. She is also the author of 2 books, What's Your Excuse for Not Clearing Your Clutter? And What's Your Excuse for Not Being More Productive? Juliet and I have both been actively involved in the UK Association of Professional Declutterers and Organisers. She as head of training and I as president. We've been great friends for about 6 years now, and we still lead training for new professional organisers together. Thank you so much for being on the show, Juliet.
I'm really thrilled to be here, Ingrid. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very, very welcome. I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about today. And our main focus is going to be to talk about procrastinations. And since you have written a whole book about it, I'm wondering, how did you become an expert on procrastination?
Well, I have to say it's a lifelong project. I, as you know, am not a naturally organized person. I'm someone who's learnt to be organized, and I can draw on my own experience. My background, as you said, is in education. And for many years, I witnessed students and lecturers as well procrastinating. I witnessed other people and I experienced it myself because it's just endemic in the university life. And then when I became a professional organizer, which was about 10 years ago, I realized that even though I was working in a different sphere with different types of people, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter what kind of home you live in, what kind of background you have, people still get stuck. People suffer from lack of confidence. They avoid things that they want to do. And I realized that it's just a universal feature. And I became really fascinated by it. So I've read lots of books. I've been on courses. And I have to confess, when people ask me what my qualification is, I say that I have an unfinished PhD in my loft. And I myself procrastinated for over 7 years writing a PhD that I never finished, and that became, I said, I have a PhD in procrastination. I never finished it. But I learned everything there is to know about procrastination through my own experience, and now I'm an expert on helping people to avoid the kind of mistakes that I made. So it's my own life experience that has taught me.
I see. Well, I think for full disclosure, listeners, this is really true because Juliet and I have traveled together. So I know that she's actually a bit of a messy, disorganized person.
But I learn. I learn. And I learn from you, Ingrid. I've learned a great deal from you. But, they say we teach what we need to learn. Yeah. And I'm constantly learning and putting into practice the things that I teach. I do my best. I do live by the motto that we need to walk our talk. And I'm putting into practice the strategies that I teach other people too. And I'm getting there.
Thank you for your honesty, Juliet, because I think that's what it's all about in this podcast, to be honest and be real life people and real life things that we all have to deal with. So can you tell us exactly what procrastination is? Because it seems like a word that's being thrown around everywhere, but what is it?
Yes. So I sometimes ask my clients to describe how they feel when they're procrastinating in order to understand what exactly they're doing. And sometimes they describe it metaphorically, like wading through treacle or feeling like there's a heavy burden on their shoulders. And what they really mean when they're facing something that they don't want to do is either avoiding something. We all avoid, whether it's a pile of ironing or paperwork that needs to be filed or homework that needs to be tackled. It's things that you know you need to do, things that you might actually want to do, but you just can't get around to doing it. That's the most common form of procrastination. But there's another one which doesn't get talked about so often, which is when we start something really enthusiastically. Like you might decide to declutter your kitchen, you empty out all the cabinets, and then you look at all the mess and you think, oh my goodness, what have I done? How do I move forward? And you just feel stuck. So it's when you make the start, but then you can't finish the task. And when you've got unfinished projects around the house, and I find that clutter often arises because people have started something, but they can't finish it. And that's also a form of procrastination. So it's both not being able to get started and then not being able to finish.
Interesting, because I kind of always saw procrastination as something that you can't get started on. But I think it's very true, because when I do talks for groups, I always give an example of things that are clutter in somebody's home.
Yes.
And I give an example of, because I speak to a lot of church groups and women's groups, and I normally and elderly groups as well. And I say, are there anything that you have knitting or that you're crocheting or that you're enthusiastically started on many, many years ago, but it's still lurking in your cupboards and you still haven't finished it. And I see that as clutter as well. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think
that link to procrastination now.
It's kind of the aspirational clutter where you buy the book or you buy the arts and crafts materials and you might start. We've all seen those unfinished craft projects or those, but also the paperwork that doesn't make its way to the filing cabinet or into the desk or where it needs to be, even though you might start off thinking, today I'm really going to do it, I'm going to tackle it, but something gets in the way. And we can talk about that, a bit later on, about why people procrastinate.
Okay.
But it's not always avoiding things.
Super, super interesting so far, listeners. So are you already thinking of things that you started yourself at home and that you are either have not started yet, or are you in the middle of and you can't seem to finish? So maybe listeners, this is a good moment to have a think about those projects and ask yourself, why am I procrastinating about it? So that's my next question. Why do we procrastinate?
Well, it's really interesting you asked me that, Ingrid, because as a coach, and you've probably heard me say this before, as a coach, I don't encourage people to ask the question why. I think you can get lost in your head. You could actually we could have a conversation all day, and you could sit and talk about why we do things or why we don't do things. And it is fascinating. I think procrastination usually stems from fear. It's either fear of failure, not getting things right, or it's fear of success. What happens if I do this? And it leads on to something else. But generally, I don't think it's terribly helpful to look at why we do things. I think it's more important to think about, what do I want to do? How am I going to do it? What help do I need? Who can help me? When am I going to start? All those more practical, motivational questions. I think the key thing when people say, why do I procrastinate? The key thing for me is to recognize that it's a habit. Mm-hmm. It's not a personality trait. It's something that you've learned to do over time. Maybe you've been influenced by something somebody said to you in the past. Maybe it's a result of a difficult experience you've had in the past, that you can go into lots of conversations with other people or with yourself about that. But just recognizing it's a habit, and we all acquired habits. I think clutter is a habit as well. I know we've discussed this too, that clutter can accumulate over time, and then it just becomes part of your life. And the same way as procrastination, we learn to procrastinate from a very early age over something. Sometimes kids can, avoid tidying up their rooms, or avoid doing their homework, or avoid having difficult conversations, or avoid making decisions. And then it becomes a habit. But I don't dwell too much on the why. I'm much more interested in the, what are we going to do about it, and how are we going to get it done? I think that's something you and I share. Yeah,
that's a true declutter coach spoken, I think. we look at solutions and at opportunities instead of looking back
We don't want to analyze things too much because
Yeah.
it becomes too theoretical, and it's fascinating, but it's not motivating.
Okay. I like that. So you have written, like I said, you've written a whole book about, well, you've actually written 2 books, but the book we're talking about today is What's Your Excuse for Not Being More Productive? Overcome Your Excuses, Stop Procrastinating, and Get Things Done. And in your book, you describe 8 reasons. Well, they're called excuses, but I call them more reasons. And you talk about different reasons like time, knowledge, mood, tasks, fears, responsibility, self-belief, and results. And of course, I read your book, but I'm particularly interested to chat about 4 of these 8 reasons. So I would like to talk to you about time, mood, fears, and responsibility. So let's just go through them one by one, so our listeners can keep following what we're talking about. And shall we start with time?
Mm-hmm.
So
can I just qualify something you said though, because you've suggested these are reasons, and I just wanted to explain that the way I wrote them was not as reasons, not so much as explanations, but they're more about the stories that we tell ourselves.
Okay.
They're stories, and stories that we create. We get stuck in our stories. So we tell ourselves things about the world or about how we perceive ourselves. And my whole approach is to question, what is the story that you're telling yourself in this situation? And then how can we look at it from a different perspective? And then how can you shift the story and then move into action? So it's not so much dwelling on why we do things, like I said before. It's more about what's really going on here? What are you telling yourself? How is that stopping you? How is that feeding your procrastination? And let's look at it a bit more closely. Okay. So when it comes to time, you asked me about time. Very often people have misjudged the time that they have. They say, I don't have enough time, or I'm too busy, or I don't have time for this project, or I don't have time to sort out my wardrobe. And what they really mean, let's dig a little bit deeper. What are they saying when they say I don't have time? We all have the same amount of time. You've probably heard that. We all have 24 hours a day. And it's a question of how do we use that time? Mm-hmm. How do we decide what do we prioritize? That is the key thing. So when someone says to me, I don't have time, what I'm really hearing is, I'm not making this a priority. Mm-hmm. And we do the things that matter in our lives. Obviously, there are things that, if you don't have the resources, or if you don't have the health, or you don't have the physical capability, there are things that restrict us. But when it comes to time, how do you spend your time? What else are you doing with your time? How much time are you spending on social media? How much time are you spending doing things that you perhaps don't realize how much time you're spending on? Let's make it a priority. So if it's a priority to, if you had to move house, if you had a guest coming to stay, if you were redecorating, you would find the time to sort out the things in your home that you need to tackle, because you'd have a deadline, you'd have an incentive. So let's look at what's really going on with time. And when people say they're too busy, again, that's another story, which I often hear. I'm too busy to do this, that, or the other. I'm too busy to clear out my loft, or I'm too busy to clear the surfaces on my kitchen. Let's look at, we live in a world where we're kind of, I talk about busy bravado. We're all obsessed with being busy. So how often do people, when you ask them how they are, they say, I'm so busy, and they're all in a tiz because we're all so busy. Why don't we just slow down a little bit and look at what really matters in our lives? Let's look at, does it really matter to you to live in a neat, tidy, minimalist home? Or do you want to just make a few little adjustments that would make your life and your home and your family life more manageable, more pleasant? Would you enjoy? And it might mean making just a little change, not revolutionizing your whole life. So let's look at, just quit the busy bravado and slow down and make a little space. Let's declutter your schedule and think about how you can look at time differently and then learn to manage time differently.
What I really liked in this topic as well is that under I'm too busy, you said you have to learn to say no.
Oh, it's so difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, very much so.
I think it's a constant struggle for many of us, especially people who have a lot of commitments, whether it's family, work, community commitments, hobbies, all sorts of other things. And people who enjoy life, we enjoy taking on responsibilities. We enjoy going out with friends. We enjoy doing things and being active. But sometimes you need to just stop and breathe and focus on what really matters. Maybe I need to stay home and have an early night instead of chasing around like crazy. Maybe I need to just make a little space to catch up with my paperwork and make sure my tax return is done on time. So there are times when we need to say no, not just to other people, but also saying no to ourselves. And that's when it's difficult, because we don't learn these skills. We very often don't learn how to say no, and how to say no without apologizing as well. That's a very cultural thing. It's a very British thing to say, I'm so sorry. But actually, you don't always have to apologize for setting boundaries and setting limits and saying no.
Listeners, I love this. So I don't know how about you, but I'm learning as well. As I'm speaking to Juliet, I'm thinking to myself, yes, I've been saying a lot of yes recently. I need to say no more often. So this is also very good for me to hear this.
I love telling people that no is a positive word. No gets a lot of bad press, but it can be a really positive thing too.
Wonderful advice. There's a couple of other things under time that I thought were fascinating. One of the things you also say is, I still have plenty of time. And you talk about the perception of time. I thought that was really interesting. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's really interesting that we learn as children to tell the time. So we might learn how to read time on a clock, but we don't really learn how to estimate time. So how long is it going to take me to do this? If it's going to take me 5 minutes, I might think it's going to take me 5 minutes to answer an email, but then I get lost in my own thoughts and I get a bit distracted, and that email might end up taking me half an hour instead of 5 minutes, and I've lost that time without even noticing where it's gone. So there's underestimating how long things are going to take, and that can be an issue when you think, oh, I'm just going to sort out this one drawer. I'm just going to take out my socks or my underwear and I'm going to sort out my drawer. And then you don't realize how many emotions and fears and anxieties and all sorts of things will come up, and you'll get stuck. That's when procrastination happens. So there's mismanaging time or underestimating time, but there's also the just not knowing how long things are going to take and thinking that it's going to take you forever. Sometimes it's the other way around. You can overestimate. So you think, I'm not going to sort out that wardrobe because it's going to take me all day and I haven't got a whole day to do it. Whereas I would say, let's just start with 15 minutes. It's amazing what you can accomplish. Let's break it down into chunks, and let's not do the whole wardrobe. Let's just look at your black t-shirts. How many black t-shirts have you got? And let's just look at those 10, 15 minutes. As you know too, Ingrid, you can get a lot done in a really short space of time. So it's that ability to look at time in, I like to think about time as chocolate. I often make my clients laugh when I say, time is like chocolate. You can look at it as a block. You can have like a 3-hour block or a day, and you can have dedicate a big chunk of time to a project, or you can use the little sprinkles. You know, those little, I know you're Dutch and I know you know all about chocolate sprinkles. I can't remember what they're called in Dutch, but
hagelslag.
I wouldn't even try to pronounce that. But they're like the little 10-minute, 15-minute tasks that you can do. So that's the little sprinkles of time. And when you see time it becomes more manageable and it becomes much more creative as well.
Wonderful. I would like to do one more thing, because I think this is so time. I love this whole time thing that we're talking about. So I love your thing. Someday isn't the day of the week. That's one of my favorite quotes of you. I love that. And I use it all the time.
I have to admit, it's not entirely original. I think I saw it on Twitter somewhere, but I use it all the time as well.
I think it's so fascinating, because people say that I'll do it someday, or I'm gonna need it someday. And
Yes.
it's so vague, isn't it?
Yes, and I think one of the reasons we hold on to clutter very often is that uncertainty of when we might need something. And so like I'll say to a client, if you can name a specific occasion when you're going to use it, like I'm going to wear this hat when I go to a wedding, or I'm going to wear this coat when I go to a funeral, or I'm going to need that book when I prepare for that exam, then it's fine. But if it's someday I might need this, then let's look a little bit more closely at the story that you're telling yourself.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Okay, let's move on to mood. You've got a chapter about mood, and you discuss several things. So take the floor, Juliet. So what is it that you would like to share about mood?
Well, I think another set of stories that we tell ourselves around when we procrastinate is the most common one is I'm overwhelmed. Yeah. I just don't know where to start. It's just all too much. I'm too tired. I don't feel like it. I'm not ready. All these feelings that relate to how we are. We're not in the mood, basically. I'm not in the mood to sort out my shoes. And the fact is, decluttering on your own can be really daunting. And it can be really boring. And it can be very difficult, which is why there are professional organizers and declutterers like us around. But if someone is trying to do it on their own, I would say you don't have to be in the mood. Are you ever in the mood to brush your teeth? You just get on and do it. Are you ever in the mood who was ever in the mood to do their tax return? Honestly, there are things in life that we know we have to get on and do. And there are things that if you focus on the benefits, if you try and turn it into a positive goal, you can visualize the kind of room that you want to wake up in, or the kind of wardrobe that you want to be greeted by in the morning, and break things down into bite-sized tasks. I mentioned earlier about taking little steps so that you can be less overwhelmed. Don't let your mood be the obstacle, because actually if you can find a way to take just one step, you can lift your mood. I mean, it's so liberating, and there's nothing beats the feeling of crossing something off your to-do list, or taking a bag to the charity shop, or just feeling that sense of achievement because you've accomplished something that you've been wanting to do for some time, whether it's decluttering or whether it's, something relating to your work or a hobby. So don't get stuck with the mood. Let your mood, acknowledge it. I'm not saying you should ignore it. Acknowledge it and find a way to take one small step, and that can help to lift the mood.
Yeah, you've got a really lovely quote in your book saying there is almost no such thing as ready, there is only now. If you wait,
I love it when people quote from my book and I don't remember writing things.
I think it was a quote by somebody else, but I thought it was so good to have in your book, because it makes you realize that if you wait for the perfect moment and the perfect time, and you feel ready and you are ready and you feel like you're on top of everything,
yes,
the moment might never come.
No, absolutely. That's so true. And
it's all about creating those habits, isn't it?
Yeah, creating the habits and taking those first small steps. Just the very first step. I like to think about, I tell clients about visualizing and then defining what is the very first thing that you need to do. And for some of our clients, that might mean literally opening the wardrobe door, or opening it, or going into a room. I mean, you might have a room in your house that you haven't actually dared to go into for some time, or you might have a suitcase that you haven't looked in, or a box of papers that you haven't dared look at. It's just lifting the lid and peeking inside and saying, I can do this. Mm-hmm. I don't have to be ready. I can do this.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Also, one tip that I took from your book is when you say I'm too tired, maybe you're a bit dehydrated and you need a bit more water. So if you're feeling tired, it might not only be that you need to get some more sleep and that you need to work with your body clock, but also make sure that you drink water. And that's exactly what I say as well all the time to my clients. Let's have a break and have a glass of water to keep the energy up. So I thought that was a really good reminder as well, for myself again, to make sure that you keep that balance of not getting dehydrated. So I thought that was very, very interesting. Okay. Is there anything else you would like to add to this, Juliet, about mood? Or shall we move on to fears?
Yeah, let's talk about fear, because that's a very juicy topic.
Okay.
How scary is clutter? How scary is the unknown? It's not taking a step in a new direction, starting something new can be really scary. So, I mean, we're talking about clutter, but it can be true of starting a new job or starting a new relationship. Anything new and different is scary. However unpleasant the current situation is, taking a step to make changes can be scary. I posted something on my Facebook page last year on Halloween that said, forget ghosts and ghoulies, there's nothing more scary than the clutter under my bed. And I had so many likes and so many people responding to that, because I think we put things in boxes and bags and shove them up in the loft or down in the basement or at the back of the garage, and we don't want to look at them. And especially paper, that's particularly scary, because you don't know what it holds, you don't know what you're going to find. And I think opening up boxes and bags or looking into scary spaces takes you back into the past, confronts you with decisions, reminds you of things you haven't accomplished or things that you will never do, clothes that will never fit you, or books that you will never read, or photographs of people that you may never see again. There can be lots of sadness and lots of pain. It can be a very painful experience, again, which is why much of our role as professional organizers is to support our clients and just to be with them. Sometimes we don't have to do the work. We don't do the work for them, but we are just present, offering our support and empathy and just witnessing the difficult emotions that come up and just helping them to acknowledge how scary it is. And it's also scary sometimes to make decisions, to worry, am I making the right decision? Am I holding on to something or letting something go? Am I giving it to the right person? Those decisions can be scary as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons why fear holds us back. And there's a lot of reasons why it's rewarding and liberating to work through that fear and actually to not let it hold you back. Yeah. But I think it's important to acknowledge. Yeah. And I think many of my clients, and I'm sure you'll agree because we've talked about this before, are incredibly brave. I think it's a very brave step to acknowledge that something in your life or in your home or in your life needs to change. It's very brave to ask for help, to phone somebody or email someone and say, I can't do this on my own. I'd like to find out how you can help me. Yeah. And I think it's very brave to take those first few steps.
And it doesn't necessarily need
bravery.
And it doesn't necessarily need to be a professional organizer. It can be a friend, it can be a neighbor, it can be a family member.
Yes,
it can be,
yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just saying I'm ready for this. I'm ready to make some changes. I'm not going to procrastinate anymore. I'm going to kick this habit. Yeah. And I'm going to take those first few steps.
Yeah, because of course, if you don't do anything, the situation can really create even more anxiety and stuff that can go wrong even worse. I mean, by not opening the post, that fine that used to be £50 can now escalate into £200 or £500 or what dollars or whatever it is, because you haven't taken the action, because you're so afraid of opening that envelope.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
And do something straight away.
Yeah. And the fact is, nothing is so fearful as anxiety itself. We often worry about things that when we worry about, I worry about going to the dentist, and every time I go to the dentist, I think to myself afterwards, why was I so worried about that? I built it up into such an anxiety, and then it wasn't that bad. And actually, many of my clients will say to me, I was dreading this, but actually it turned out to be really fun. And I'm so glad it was difficult, but I'm glad we did what we did. So yeah. I think, and sometimes the fear is bigger than we make it bigger than it needs to be.
Yeah. So listeners, take a deep breath and let all those worries go, and and get started with whatever step it is. Lastly, I would like to talk about responsibility, Juliet. So what would you like to share with us about responsibility?
Well, just as you mentioned earlier that we don't learn how to say no, we need to learn how to delegate. We don't have to do everything. And I think whether you're a control freak or a super mum or a successful professional who's used to making all the decisions, sometimes it really pays to let other people get on with the job, whether it's delegating to other members of your family or to other members of your team, or just saying to yourself, this doesn't have to be my job. I don't have to do everything. And I think one of the reasons that people procrastinate is thinking they're overwhelmed because only I can do it. And I think, as business owners, learning to let go of some of that responsibility, find the right people that you can delegate to, find the right person who can do the job, but also know it doesn't have to be done exactly the way that you would do it.
Yes.
I love the quote from my friend Rivka Caroline, says that when her young child makes his bed, it doesn't have to be perfect. But if she's jumping out of a plane, she wants to know that the person who folded her parachute has done the job perfectly. So she's kind of relaxing a little bit and saying other people can do things. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the way I would do it. But it doesn't have to be me always to
do the task.
Yes, the task has to be done, but I don't have to be the one to do it.
Yeah. Listeners, very, very good information here. What can you delegate from your list of things that you want to do or you feel that you have to do? Is there anything you can delegate to other people and indeed not worry about everything being perfect all the time? So my next question to you is, Juliet, is procrastination a universal problem, or does it affect certain types of people more than others?
This is a really fascinating question, and I know from my own client work that there doesn't seem to be any distinction between age, gender, education, background. Procrastination affects all of us. But I have done a little bit of research on this as well and looked at what social scientists have said, and I found some good news. That
we like good news.
This is really good news. So it turns out that there isn't much of a distinction between men and women. Perhaps women procrastinate slightly less than men. Maybe that's because we multitask and get things done, but I don't like to promote gender stereotypes too much, so I'm not too interested in that. What I do find fascinating is that people tend to procrastinate less as they get older. And there isn't a lot to celebrate about getting older, but this is one thing that I think is really good news. And I think it might be to do with the fact that partly as you get older, you become less inhibited and less concerned about what other people think. And I probably wouldn't have written the books that I wrote in the last year, 10 or 20 years ago. I probably would have been too worried about what other people might think. And now I'm not bothered at all. I just want to get my message out there. So I think we become more confident and less inhibited. And I think that the clock ticking and that fear of mortality and thinking, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? If I don't get round to, I don't know, decorating my home or writing the novel or creating a home that I actually want to live in, when am I going to, you can make all the excuses in the world about the time's not right or I'm overwhelmed. But I think as you get older, your priorities do become clearer in some ways. And so maybe that is something to look forward to know that procrastination is going to become less of a habit as you get older.
Very interesting. And that's good news. I agree. I agree. I think that is true. I think I worry less as well now than when I did when I was younger. So I think that's really good news. So we talked about perfection already. So is there a link between procrastination and perfectionism? I think
my friend Rivka Caroline talks about procrastination and perfectionism as evil twins, that they go hand in hand, and I love that image. I think people who are perfectionists, who worry about everything being just so, might hesitate to do things. I'm not going to write that email because if I don't formulate it exactly right, and if I or if I might not know in advance what I want my bedroom to look like, and therefore I'm not going to sort it out because I haven't got this perfect image. I'll spend hours on Pinterest and looking through magazines and dreaming about living in a designer home, but because it's not perfect, I'm not going to tackle that pile of books on the floor or that pile of laundry that needs to be put away. So I think worrying about creating a perfect life or a perfect home can hold you back. The reality is life's not perfect. Life is messy and wonderful, and we just have to engage with it and not worry about it being perfect. I love this quote that I heard from someone else: why strive for perfect when excellent will do? We can make life excellent. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, so true. And I think that's what we see in our clients' homes as well, that sometimes people keep buying the storage because they think that storage solution is the perfect thing to get them organized. While the whole idea is, if you have less stuff to deal with, it all falls into place. You don't need to have everything, the perfect containers to do the job. I use a lot of shoe boxes to get organized at first, and then buying a good storage holder is the last thing that needs to be done, not the first thing that needs to be done.
Yes, I love that. Yes,
yeah, because you first need to determine what it is actually that you want to keep in your life and what makes you happy. Instead of thinking about it has to look exactly as in the magazine or on the TV show or in the designer book that I've seen. It doesn't work that way. There probably have been 25 stylists who worked on that perfect photo for 5 days. It's there's never stuff in those cupboards that look beautiful.
Yes, that's true. And those people with those beautiful, stylish, minimalist homes don't live with children and pets and partners and don't have visitors over to eat at their perfect dining room tables. So,
yeah, I think it's all about finding what works for you and not getting too stuck into having everything perfect. I think that is really, really true. So if you want everything to be perfect, please let that go a little bit. And maybe excellent is definitely far more than good enough. So is procrastination always a bad thing, Juliet? Can there ever be good reasons for procrastinating?
Yeah, well, you know me, Ingrid. I'm one of the most positive people out there. I'm an idealist, and I don't think procrastination is always a bad thing. I think sometimes we procrastinate about things that don't really need to be done. And by the time we get around to doing them, or rather by the time we get around to thinking about them, the need has gone. How often have you put off making an appointment about a medical issue and then it's cleared up on its own and you think, well, I didn't really need to do that. So I'm not saying you should always avoid going to the doctor, but there are times when you kind of instinctively know that you can avoid or delay something, that it doesn't have to get done at that time. And the other positive thing about procrastination is that when you're not doing the thing that you are procrastinating about, you can be incredibly productive. So while you're avoiding your tax return, clean out the fridge and sort out your wardrobe and book your summer holiday and organize your photos. And being a procrastinator doesn't mean that you're lying on the sofa watching TV. People often tell me, and I know from my own experience, that when I'm avoiding something that I need to do, I go into super active mode and get all sorts of other things done. My inbox can be clear and my desk can be sorted. I really ought to be sending an email to somebody to, I don't know, filling in an application for something that I really don't want to do, but I will get on with lots of other things. And so that becomes a very productive form of procrastination. So it's not such a bad thing.
And also, I think sometimes procrastinating a little bit also gives you time to think about
definitely
the different options that are available. So it prevents you from rushing into everything. And I'm not talking about procrastinating for days about things, but it is all right to procrastinate a little bit so you can think of your options.
Yes, I think the key thing is to be honest with yourself and to say to yourself, if you find that you're avoiding something, to say to yourself, am I procrastinating? Or do I need a little bit more time to make a decision?
Yeah.
You may not be ready. You may have a wedding dress in your wardrobe that's taking up a lot of space and you're not sure what to do with it or whether you're ready to part from it. That may not be procrastination. I think it's worth saying to yourself, am I ready to make this decision? And it may be that you need a little bit longer, or you need to have a conversation with somebody, or you need to take a photograph of it and then think about what to do. So I think it's just being honest with yourself and acknowledging that when we are avoiding or when we're stuck, we need to make more decisions. And how are we going to make those decisions? So recognizing that I'm not ready because I need to do something else first. I need to chat to a friend, or I need to find out how much something else costs before, how much it would cost to replace it before I give away. I don't want to give away my old, radio until I find out how much it costs to replace if I need a new one. So there might be information that you need.
Yeah.
That's not procrastination. And creative people, we talked about people who've got knitting and arts and crafts and stuff like that, will often use that time to develop ideas and thoughts and it takes time so you might not be ready to, you might want to write that novel but not feel ready because the ideas are still percolating. But I would say be honest with yourself about what it is that is holding you back.
Yeah. So of course the $1 million question now, Juliet, is, do you ever still procrastinate?
I think it's a lifelong project. I think we all procrastinate. Anybody who tells you that they don't procrastinate is deceiving themselves. The key is to make sure that you do the things that matter, that figure out what really matters, whether it's taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, taking care of your business, taking care of your home. What are the essential tasks that need to get done? And what are the things that maybe that you'd like to do but are not ready to do or don't have the time or resources to do? I have about 5 books in my head that I haven't yet written. And I'm trying to decide where to prioritize my time. But I procrastinate over writing, even though I love it. I really enjoy it. But it is a constant challenge. And I learn from that too. I learn from the experience of dealing with my own procrastination.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Juliet, for all this fantastic information. So listeners, that's it for this episode. We hope you've all enjoyed listening and are inspired to take action. Thank you so much, Juliet, for being our guest. I've loved talking to you and finding out more about overcoming your excuses, stop procrastinating, and getting things done. Listeners, I hope you've learned a lot as well today, and Juliet's examples will be helpful for you and you can implement them in your own home. Juliet's books are available on Amazon, and we will post a link in the show notes along with her website details. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. If you'd like to get more tips and advice, please follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we have a lively, supportive Facebook group community where we chat all things clutter. We'd love to see you there. If you don't want to miss the next weekly episode, subscribe to the Declutter Hub podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and I will pop it into your notifications each Friday. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast. Check out declutterhub.com for more inspiration, and don't forget to tune in next week.